Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers as we talk Seahawks football. Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers, here to talk of Seahawks football. Keith, how you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. It's been kind of a crazy week for me personally, but I'm getting through it. I'm surviving, and I am ready to talk some football. So Let's get in. We're going to break down this week's game against Arizona, which I believe is an absolute must-win for Seattle. If they don't win this game, it's pretty much over.
So we're breaking down what you're saying, or are we going to talk Green Bay? And that is up till.
Yeah, I mean, this week we have that game coming up, but the Green Bay game. God, can we just? Do we? Oh yeah, I guess we have to talk about it. We do kind of have the show.
Well, a little bit, just a little bit.
It was so.
It was in hand. It was there. It was there. Like the defense is playing like a top 10 defense now. And I'm not even exaggerating.
Really well. The defense played great against a really good offense, and the offense just could do nothing. And I know we all had the expectation with Wilson being back that the offense was gonna return and be good, and that was probably unrealistic because he looked rusty, like beyond rusty, and he was clearly having problems with the finger because he left a few passes way over the head of people. But
it could have been that worked, but they had a completely wrong game plan. At least Russell had the wrong game plan in his mind. I'm not exactly sure how the coaches drew it up in the meetings in the week prior to this game on the field. It's changed. Like, didn't take what the defense was given, which was an empty box. We ended up having 11 rushing attempts against the Green Bay Packers when we probably had close to 30 in this game, considering how close it was. Fourth quarter, ended up throwing the ball like 40 times. Russ completed only of them, had a couple of picks, just went over and over again to try to go for the home run ball, which we've seen before. When it's successful, everyone's happy. We walk away with a win. When it's not successful, it bogs everything down. We can't convert third downs. We can't keep our defense off the field. Eventually, they wore down, and Green Bay scored 17 points, and that was the game.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just the home run shots. I mean, those were in the fourth quarter. They were like, let's throw it into the end zone and hope for a pass interference or whatever, because the offense was doing nothing. But there were other plays. There were other opportunities. And then Wilson just sailed the ball high because he couldn't grip the ball right. So there were other things. And the offensive line was just playing terribly. So, I mean, Wilson wasn't even getting he wasn't even allowed to finish his drop before he was already under pressure on a lot of the passes.
That's true. So I mean, all of that is true. I think both of what we just said is absolutely true. I was more on the emotional kind of overarching thing, and you were really trying to get into the weeds a little bit on the technical stuff, and you were absolutely correct. If we point to the offensive line, it was seemingly abysmal. At the same time, Russell Wilson was taking much longer to get the ball out of his hands than
that's what I was saying earlier with
the other quarterback in the game. Rodgers was getting the ball out quick, especially after that. After the first half adjustments, he came out and everything was just like quick, getting the ball out, trying to get into a rhythm. Whereas Russ just continued to kind of take longer in the pocket, not get that first read, and he couldn't get into a rhythm.
He hasn't played in a month. And
am I being too hard on him?
I think you are, because if the first read was taken away, he's got to go through his progressions, and he was going through his progressions slower than he normally does. And so, he was holding onto the ball a little longer than we would have liked, But if they're taking
But you
away
still,
the first
when
read,
you know that, though, when you know
So
that
he- so he's
the
supposed to
offensive
throw to-
line is struggling
he's-
and you
so
get
he-
to 3 seconds in your drop back,
but
that's a problem.
if your first read is covered, you don't throw the ball into coverage and give up an interception.
Yeah, I get that, but in hindsight, and I get it. During the game, you can't figure that out. But you watch the all 22 film. Let's just say Matty Brown's, posting some videos online. He's showing first read options that are wide open, Keith, that Russ has bypassed and gone for the shots instead. So he's playing outside of the offensive design when he does that. But
he's not. Here's the problem with that.
But
is that
he's throwing into double coverage.
You are assuming what the first read is on the play. And I can tell you without a doubt that the way this offense is set up.
The first read is what Russell Wilson reads at the line of scrimmage. And if he reads single coverage on
everything is read deep to close. And so his first read
is that a problem?
It's every team does that. You want your quarterback looking at those plays.
Yes. The problem is that when you're making the line calls and all that stuff, and you're still at the line of scrimmage and you're calling your audibles and stuff. Yeah, you're identifying opportunities in those few seconds. But when the ball is snapped, it seems like that dynamic needs to change when you immediately see double coverage on DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. You've got to go. Your third option has got to be your first option. I'm just saying it's just boom, 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 and consistently we're not seeing that.
That's just not the way quarterbacking in the NFL works. You have designed reads. You have to go through your reads. If you just jump straight to your dump off every time, right? That's Charlie Whitehurst. And the team lost 6-9 to a terrible Browns team because that's what Charlie Whitehurst did every single time. Is he automatically
that Browns game? That popped into my head yesterday. I was just thinking about the same thing.
But that was literally what he did. He never even looked. He knew where his check down, his outlet, his swing pass was, yes, and he didn't care about anything else. He automatically went to that because he didn't want to get sacked.
We obviously know Russell is not that.
Yes,
but somehow or another, though, Keith, there's some sort of disconnect, and I want to try to figure it out. It's like you and I are kind of like ships passing in the night talking about this thing right now, and I'm just trying. Let's get to a core understanding of like what's happening, what happened specifically in this Green Bay game. You can attribute it to him not being able to grip the ball. You can contribute it to the offensive line.
There's a bunch of things that are contributing here, but I think what you're talking about isn't one of them, because he was going through his progression, the way the plays are designed, the way the progression is designed. The problem is being rusty. He was going through his progression really slowly, and I think that was a big problem. Was his coming off his first read, going to his second, going to his third. Was taking him much longer than it normally does.
I still have a little problem with that, and the reason that I have a little bit of a problem with that is that he ended up having going through 12 or 13 pressures as well as 3 sacks while going through his progression slowly. So if he knows he's going to go through progression slowly, if the coaches recognize the fact that he's going to go through his progression slowly, we're within a 3-point game up until the fourth quarter. Why aren't we running the ball? Why aren't we doing anything to mitigate the pressure on this situation?
That's what I said. There's 4 parts to why the offense failed. Russ going through his progression slowly, you can chalk up to rust. He hasn't practiced, he hasn't played. It's just been forever, and he is just. It was just processing slower than he normally does. You're right. So that's a problem. Why didn't they run the ball more? Whether it be what was Shane Waldron calling or what Russ was seeing at the line and changing to, that's a problem. You've got to run the ball more than 11 times, especially when your quarterback is struggling. You've got to go to your run game. You've got to be able to go get 4 yards here, 5 yards there, and just take the pressure off. Make it 3rd and 4 rather than 3rd and 10. Make it easy. And
Keith, but I'll point you to this stat in just this game. Russell Wilson in attempts of 10 or more yards downfield was 2 of 15. for 34 yards and 2 interceptions in this game. So it just isn't going through progression slowly and whatnot. He made choices to go to take those shots and knew that he was sailing the ball, knew that he was having a problem gripping, knew that he was throwing into coverage, and still made those attempts. Just to give you some perspective, in weeks 1 through 5, he was 24 of 38, 646 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So
he was
that's epitome of rust. I mean, that is rusty. That's not only with his throws, but mental game too.
Yeah. I mean, you go through it, you can't watch that game and think Wilson played well. He didn't.
It was one of his poorest performances, I thought. And that's why I guess I'm so hard on him. My quote, I get it. I mean, I get the idea that there's more than one thing going on here. But it just seems to me by default, we're kind of deflecting off Russ here, and we're kind of going towards the offensive line. We're going towards the play calling. We're for the defense. Because we're saying,
I'm saying that there are
Green Bay is a good defense.
There are 4 things that contributed to Seattle's poor performance. Wilson is one of them.
Okay.
And his
go through your progressions,
right? Yeah, his going through his progression slowly is one of them.
No, you go through your progressions.
throwing those, like his lack of accuracy on his deep ball. I mean, his accuracy on his deep ball is his calling card. That's what he is best at.
I agree.
And it wasn't there. He was sailing other throws. I mean, Wilson played terribly. Let's not.
Okay.
Right.
Let's talk about the other factors.
The play calling and the lack of a running game is a major problem. Where was that? Is that Waldron or is that Russ? I don't know. You don't know. And anyone other than Waldron and Russ that claims they know is lying to you.
So let's take that little piece and let's talk about that for half a second. So when Pete Carroll came out in his press conferences, he talked about just the team in general not getting into a rhythm on offense, not being able to convert on third downs, therefore shortening their opportunities to run the ball in the game, and really attributed kind of everything to that. He said leading up to the game, in the meetings throughout the week, they stress the importance of the balanced attack and all that kind of stuff. They get to the game and it just unfolded in a different way. They weren't able to convert. They got into first and long, second and long opportunities, which then forced that third and long throw that Wilson just wasn't able to complete. And they really never did get into any sort of running game at all.
Yeah. And I think that's a problem. You have to be more deliberate about it. If your quarterback's struggling, be more deliberate about it.
Especially in a tight game.
Yeah.
Where the opponent literally ran 40 minutes worth of plays on you.
Yeah.
You had the ball for 20 minutes.
So like I said,
this was not good.
I know that Pete was deflecting and saying, it's the way the game flow went and blah, blah, blah. But if you know your quarterback's struggling, go ahead and run on first down. Or even if it's 2nd and 10, go ahead.
And Alex Collins had 10 carries for 41 yards at 4.1 average.
Yeah, so 2nd and 10 because you were incomplete on the first down. Don't be afraid to run and make it 3rd and 5. Because 3rd and 5 is way better than 3rd and 10.
Yes.
And so do things like that. Like, you be okay with it. And they needed to do that. They didn't. And I don't know whether that was what the plays that Waldron was calling or what that was Wilson making changes at the line of scrimmage. But like I was saying, I don't know that. You don't know that. And anyone other than those two and Pete Carroll that claims that they know, they're lying to you because they don't know.
The only thing that worked on offense, other than Alex Collins, and he's been gimped up as well with a little groin injury for a couple of weeks, and Pete reiterated that in his press conference. But the only thing that really worked in this game, which I got kind of excited about, was Gerald Everett. 8 receptions, 63 yards. That was really the only thing that worked on a consistent basis throughout the game. Everything else was just fits and starts and just really just discombobulated. I mean, when 0 points in a game, first time in Russell Wilson's career, right? It's ugly.
So there's the first two. Okay. The third one to me is the offensive line play, because it really didn't matter what play the Seahawks were trying to run. it wasn't going to run as designed because the offensive line simply couldn't block anyone. I don't know if Dwayne Brown's hurt or what, but his play has dropped off considerably.
Well, he was hurt in this game. He went out, didn't come back. Pete Carroll did say that he's fine this week. He's going through walkthroughs. He should be good to go. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
But
we talked about this a little bit on our.
Yeah. I'm not talking about the injury and him leaving and Jamarco Jones coming in. I'm talking about even before the injury when he was playing.
No, right.
He was just getting beat over and over again.
Right. And we talked about this as far as like, okay, so if he's playing this bad consistently, and we've seen this for not just this game, but a few games, more than one game this year, where Dwayne Brown's diminished. Like it's just happening in front of our eyes where a guy gets to a certain age, he slows down a step, injuries start to pile up over the years, and those joints and so forth just become weaker. Your speed getting to the edge, it becomes less prominent, and it's time. And I think that's what's happening to Dwayne Brown. And so my question to you is, when do you bring a guy like Forsythe in to see what you've got? At what point in the season? You're 3-6 now. You could be 3-7 after this next game.
I think you wait until you're eliminated from the playoffs, because the way the NFC is shaking up, you've got 5 good teams, although both of the ones in the West are playing poorly at the moment. But you've got 5 good teams, and you've got a couple of other teams that look like they're the playoff teams, but they're in a lot of trouble because of injuries and that kind of stuff. So you can make a run. You can be 3-6 and still make a run. I think once it becomes once you get to like 7 losses or 8 losses, then now you've kind of limited yourself and you're not really able to. At that point, you got to get a guy like Forsythe some snaps, and you got to evaluate what you've got in them. And if you want them to develop into something, you got to get them some playing time so they can have tape to study.
So what do you think also about Damien Lewis over there at left guard as well? It seems like he's been struggling a little bit this year against superior competition, and and adding insult to injury in this game, he was bulldozed and called for holding on a play where he clearly didn't hold. He just got completely railroaded and run over.
Yeah. I know you were like, him to left guard is the problem. It's not, because
it's not necessarily the problem. I'm just saying it might be a contributing factor to the overall play of the offensive line.
I don't believe that it is. I mean, he's been good at times this year, and he's struggled at other times. Having Fuller next to him for most of it, I is where I contributed a lot of it too, because just not. And
I think it's 2 weak players on either side of him is really a factor.
And with Dwayne Brown's diminished play, that's hurting. And at the same time, he's a good run blocker and an okay pass blocker. And when you're only doing 11 run plays in a game, you're playing to, the thing he's not as good at. He's a good run blocking player. And if they were to run the ball more, he would look like he's playing better, because you're playing to his strengths, but they're not doing that right now. Instead, they're playing to Gabe Jackson's strength, because he's the pass blocking guard of the two of them. And guess what? He looks great. So I think that has a lot to do with it. So
okay, Lewis, so offensive line play. What's your fourth pillar?
So it really comes down with all of this is, I think that what we're seeing and what we've been seeing throughout this year is that you've got it's the time of possession part. It's the third down conversions, and this is one of those things where what you were saying earlier does have a little bit of a point. If it's 3rd and 4 and you've got a 5-yard completion, take it. On 3rd and 4, don't go for the 41-yard fade. It's such a low percentage play. You need to string together some first downs, and that is on Russ. And I know part of it is, if he sees one-on-one coverage against Metcalf, he's gonna take it and throw it out there. The
problem is, though, Keith, he's not seeing one-on-one coverage, and if he is, it's pretty well disguised, and it ends up being double coverage because the safety's hopping on him after 10 yards or whatever.
Yeah.
So the other thing that you're not really talking about is just the quality of the opponent. and Green Bay's not a slouch. They struggled in this game. It was a
Oh,
defensive game. There was no question about it. I thought a lot of their struggles was attributed to our defense being really, really solid in this game, but their defense as well, shutting down Seattle was, you got to give them credit.
That's what I said all last week, was that defense is better than people give them credit for. That is a fantastic defense in Green Bay. And yes, that had a lot to do with it, but you can play great defenses and not get shut out. I was referring to just what was wrong with Seattle, and none of the things. None of the things that I was saying take anything away from Green Bay. These are mistakes that Seattle is making. That even against a great defense, you can make these changes. You can do these other things and get better results. I think.
So everything that we talked about is fixable. I mean, this isn't like this isn't a situation where we just have serious talent deficit on offense and there's nothing we can do about it. It's just who we are. That's not true. This is a situation that is seemingly in our control. We can evolve to make changes. Russ is going to get better. Pete said he had a great week of recovery and qualifying. There was nothing in that game that happened that made his finger any worse. So it's going to continue to get better. Okay. Let's shift gears. Let's go to the other side of the ball and just talk about like a really good defensive effort in this game. Like we should have won this. This should have put us in a position to win. That's how good the defense played. I thought
the defense played really well against a really good offense and did enough to win. The defense did its job. So,
yeah. I mean, Jordan Brooks had a good game. Ryan Neal had a good game. Jamal Adams, I thought, had one of his most complete games as a Seahawk,
including an interception.
Yeah, exactly. Trey Brown's continuing to evolve and play well. I think the corner position seems to be somewhat solved, although DJ Reed had a slip on one play and allowed a monster play to them.
Yeah, but Reed wasn't as good in this game as we're used to seeing. Although, Devontae Adams makes a lot of people look like they don't have. But
nonetheless, Devontae Adams was still held in check. I mean, 6-7 receptions for 70 yards, something like that. So it's not a huge production day for him. What do you think? Let me ask you this, just an overarching question. We started horrible. We've now been like 4 or 5, 6 weeks of really fairly consistent football. Has your opinion changed of Ken Norton Jr.?
I don't know. I was thinking about that this weekend when I was watching this defense play really well against Rodgers and company, and I'm not sure what to think right now, because let this play out a little bit more, because they were really awful at the beginning of the year. That's
an appropriate answer.
And if they're that awful at the beginning of the year 2 years in a row, why? Why are they awful at the beginning of the year? What are they doing in the offseason? What are they doing during training camp that's not getting the team ready to play?
Yeah,
I think the
things that I noticed in both seasons was the fact that they were trying to install too many exotic packages and looks early in the year when the team just wasn't clearly ready for that. And that's, to me, that's the answer. Plus, you were missing KJ Wright. I think is one of the most articulate and smart, most intelligent players that the Seahawks had on defense, that helped them diagnose a lot of plays, and he was no longer there. You had Jamal Adams, who was a little ad hoc-ish in his play, maybe not entirely subscribed to the scheme early. You had a couple of corners that were fighting in Trey Brown and Witherspoon on whether or not they wanted to play exactly the way the defense was drawn up, because they didn't really trust that everyone else was going to be in their spots. You're saying
Trey Flowers, not Trey Brown.
Well, not Trey Brown, Trey Flowers, and then Witherspoon.
You said Witherspoon and Trey Brown. I'm like, Trey Brown was hurt.
Yes,
he wasn't playing.
Right.
I was just making sure we got it right.
And both those guys that I mentioned are gone. Like, they're gone. It's crazy. We went through this entire competition in the offseason and ended up with those guys being the starters, and then they're poof. they're just gone.
Well, yeah,
So,
because if they're not, this is one of the things that you and I were talked about during when the defense was bad. It was if the guys aren't willing to do it as it's drawn up, like what you're asking them to do, if they're not willing to do their job, then they shouldn't play.
yeah.
But get someone in there who's willing to do their job and not try and do everyone else's job, because playing defense requires that you are very disciplined in your assignment. And when guys weren't doing that, they shouldn't play. And so the fact that Flowers got benched and then cut should surprise no one, because he wasn't doing his job.
Okay, so I think that's a bold kind of thing to do, is jettison your two corners and go with other guys. I mean, granted, Reed came in and but nonetheless, my point is that Ken Norton Jr. did what he needed to do. I know it was late, but he did it. He got the defense back. They dumbed it down a little bit so that everyone kind of bought in, and it seems to be working. Now, granted, they're still short a few players. I think that they could use a guy like KJ Wright. They still could use a guy. I think I watched the Monday night game where Kansas City was playing, and I missed Reed, at the 3-tech, Jerron Reed. I think the team could probably use a guy like that still. So, just a big overarching question. I think you answered it appropriately. Let's let this thing play out. Let's try to figure out where we're at. But nonetheless, even if no matter how well we end, are you now still going to question how we're going to start next year, no matter what?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because they had under Norton, they never started out well in the year. They got better as the season wore on. But why are you not ready for week one? You have all off season to install everything. You've got training camp in the preseason to prep. When you get into week one, you shouldn't have people who are lost. So something that you're doing in designing your, like, how you're installing things, how you're getting buy-in, it isn't working.
What about the incomplete effectiveness of Shane Waldron? Like, how do you feel like he's doing? Or do you feel like things could be going well, or do you think that he's underwhelming, or that there are inherent structural problems? I mean, how do you take his fit in this system now?
Honestly, I don't know how you could evaluate him yet. Just the way that, the offense was fantastic during the first 5 weeks under Wilson, even though the defense was terrible, and they just the offense
didn't have any opportunities.
They didn't have possessions, but they were still number one in points per drive and yards per play, and they were the best offense in the NFL. Even though they were getting, like in the Titans game, they only had 3 possessions in the second half. And so no chance for a rhythm, no chance for, any kind of momentum. They just had to try and, at one point there was an hour between possessions because of halftime and 2 really long Tennessee. It was
that just seems so ridiculous when you said that out loud. It's just like, it's so
there
true, though.
There was over an hour of real time between Russell Wilson passes. But they were still outstanding. So I'm look at that and I go, yeah. Like I'm on board. I can't evaluate him with Geno Smith at quarterback because Geno Smith isn't good. So there's that. And this last game, how much of the run pass problem was him and how much of it was Russ? I mean, I do think that he gets, and
how much of it
heavy.
is just the fact that we don't have Chris Carson available, and Alex Collins had a groin injury, and so they were going to meter him anyway, and then they just didn't get into it. They just didn't find their rhythm. And
so there are those things, and we don't really know, but I do think that he gets pass happy, whether it's him or Russ. But if it's Russ, then it's what he's telling Russ, hey, if you see this, switch to this play, and that kind of stuff. It's leading into a pass happy offense a little too much. And so I'd like to see it. They need more than 11 called run plays in a close game. Like that just needs to be true.
59 plays. 11 carries, and only 20 minutes of possession time.
Yeah. And
that's
so
crazy. So that what that tells you right there is there's just 1, 2, 3 and out, 1, 2, 3 and out, 1, 2, 3 and out.
Yeah.
Or, or turnover. We had 2 turnovers too. So,
yep. So it's incomplete. There are some things that are really nice. Like the first 5 games were outstanding. There are some things to be concerned about. I think, like I said, the run pass usage. There was at one spot in one of the games where they ran the ball like 6 straight plays and they got 1 first down, and then it bogged down and ended up punting on the next one because they literally never tried to throw it. And that's just like, okay, we wanted you to run a little bit more in this next drive, but that doesn't mean that's the only thing you're allowed to do. So there are some things that you're like, okay, that's a little weird. He's also a first-time play caller, and I'm hoping that he learns. But there are other things that I think are much better. They're so much better than they were last year. I think the route concepts and route designs are stellar, but we just haven't had a chance to see them. It just has been so inconsistent that it seems like the entire year hasn't been in rhythm. It's just been kind of sputtering. Even when we were great, like you said, we just didn't have the opportunities. So I didn't mean to scold you when we first started. Sure you did.
About talking about Arizona, but we're going to talk about Arizona in the next show. I promise.
Yeah. No, in my head, I was thinking, I've been prepping for that show too. And I was there. And then I'm also like, I really just don't want to talk about the Green Bay game. It was so ugly.
We probably could have narrowed this down to recording one show this week because we're getting a late start because I had some technical stuff going on yesterday.
It was such completely an ugly,
my fault.
Ugly game. Just anytime your team gets shut out and everything, like I just didn't want to talk about it. So my brain was like, Arizona, let's go with that.
Yeah.
And then,
I don't know that we necessarily need to talk about the game specifically. It's more of the structure of everything that's going on. And so, so coming up, we're going to do the game preview show on the Arizona Cardinals. It sounds to me like Kyler Murray is going to be ready to go for that game. At least that's the early word out of their camp so far this week is he's practicing. He's going through the walkthroughs, but he hasn't really tested it yet. So we'll find out. I think that comes tomorrow on Thursday. And we'll see. Maybe we'll have more information by the time we push the record button as to what's going on there. Colt McCoy is their second option. And I don't think that Colt has a very good history facing the Seahawks. So they probably want to avoid that. But, they're not
Does he have a good history facing anyone?
No. It was funny because I think before he ended up in Arizona, I think that he ended up, I think he only started like 10 or 12 games his entire career, right? Only because of the injuries he had. Like he had 2 ACLs as a quarterback and it's just not been a good situation for him. But so we'll go through that. And we'll wind up our week putting that show out. And that should be a good show. Should be a fun show because this is really the do or die week for Seattle. I knew that the Green Bay game, regardless of Russell Wilson, regardless of anything else, was always going to be hard. I had it originally circled as a loss on the schedule. It's just one of those things. It's Green Bay. It's Lambeau. It's middle of November. It's a hard place to play. It just is. This game, though, you kind of want to get. Because right now we're at 3-6, we could be at 3-7. 3-7 just seems much more of an uphill battle than 3-6 right now. Even though 3-6 is just normally I would be writing that team off, but there's so many things in play. I think we have the third easiest schedule in the NFL remaining. Even though we have Arizona twice and the Rams, everything else is like totally winnable. So if this team can somehow get this game and build some momentum, I think they could really get in. I still think that they can. So it's hard to see fans give up on this team. I know it's hard having this record and seeing some of the dysfunction going on and so forth, but I'm still holding out.
Yep.
All right. Anything else?
Get out of here.
All right. All right. Find Keith at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook. SeahawksPlaybook.com is your website. We've got everything on there. find us on our YouTube channel and subscribe. I know that the team is not doing well, but we would so love everybody to stick with us and watch the shows. And you can find us on your favorite podcast app. So until next time, go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWSeahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.